Okay, thank you for tuning back in again. Here's the final part of the lesson and the final part of the section here. We're going to look at two phenomenon with news networks with the burnout and fade away trends of news topics and context. So let's continue on with the Google Doc and the source, and we will finish this together. So this section basically highlights the 24 hours news phenomenon when covering different news topics. Please articulate which networks cover which topics from most to least and what times of the years those topics piqued in interest. For this section, let yellow represent Fox, blue CNN, and green MSNBC. So what is the 24 hours news cycle phenomenon exactly? So far we focused on raw word counts. That's useful for getting a broad sense of the issues networks are focusing on, but it leaves out a big part of the picture. You've probably heard about the 24-hour news cycle, the phenomenon where reporters scramble to cover a breaking news event before it fades from the public eye and another item takes place. So let's try to answer that question right now. Basically, it's the time when maybe journalists and reporters and I think the reason why they act with a lot of deliberate speed on this is because they just want to make sure that they can be the first to cover a big story. And sometimes they make a big story that isn't really worthy of big story status before they know all the details. But either way, that is the phenomenon in our news. So let's talk about Michael Flynn here first as our topic. So here's an example of a news event that follows that pattern. This chart shows how frequently the word Flynn was used by the three networks over time. There's a big spike on December 1st, when Michael Flynn pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI, but coverage quickly tapers off. But that's not always the case. Some news items are so big and persistent that they're almost always in the spotlight. So here, first place, we have MSNBC, followed by CNN, followed by Fox. So now, let's be honest. Why do you think that the news networks invested the most coverage on this topic? What do you notice about the said timing of the topic? Well, I personally would have to think that maybe MSNBC would cover this more so to make the Trump administration look bad. But as far as the timing is concerned, if I'm not mistaken, back here in the doc, December, well, of course, this is the time of the trial. And additionally, when news first broke. So Michael Flynn becomes a really controversial person for the Trump administration, but I think that the way that they did it upon news leaks was pretty telling of their agenda in this. Next year is President Trump as a news topic, and analyzing him, coverage of President Trump, for example, is near constant. You know, it ebbs and flows, and there are slight differences between networks, but for the most part, it's always there. So let's go ahead and look at this. And we should be good to analyze this. Well, January 11th, 2018, we have MSNBC, followed by CNN, followed by Fox again. So, and once again, you guys can color code this accordingly. Now, to be fair, the reason why this might be covered the most, and as far as timing, well, I think it's still yet again possible that the MSNBC would cover him more to yet again maybe discredit him or to maybe expose possible scandals. To say that MSNBC is acting as a watchdog during the Trump administration is a little bit, not emphasizing it enough. And I think that they did cover him maybe more than probably what they should have. But the reality is that this happened before the State of the Union, which is, one of Trump's most major speeches that he gives in his administration and his time as president. And I think this also maybe shows in the midst of a new year, people evaluating their voter needs. And people might often do that in the new year of any election year or post-election year. Topic 3, National Anthem protest. This one's interesting too in the sense that, finally there's a long tail pattern, and that's when a news event receives lots of initial coverage, but instead of immediately fading away, it sticks around in the background for a while. It's especially interesting when only one network keeps up that coverage. So in terms of the National Anthem protest, Colin Kaepernick began kneeling for the National Anthem in 2016, but coverage picked up in early September when Trump tweeted about the protest. So coverage of the protest quickly tapered off. Of all the networks except one, Fox kept in the news through November. So it's Fox, CNN, MSNBC. So in this order, let's put it there. And the reason why that is the case, well, I think it really comes down to this. You know, Fox News probably views this as a political issue. And of course, they might want to give more coverage to Trump, rallying a pro-American message. So whereas maybe Fox News might be quick to point out that kneeling for the flag is anti-American, maybe to counter that, they would give more light and credence to Trump accordingly. Let's move on to the next part here, and this is the final part of the section and the lesson. Context is key. Directions. This section basically highlights the number and context of keywords that are used by 3 news networks. For each topic, please write the top 5 context words that are used for each news network's coverage. So 13, why is context important when studying news network coverage? Well, let's read this part right here. Basically, all this data about how often words are used is interesting, but it still misses something big. It's entirely possible for 2 networks to cover the exact same event or issue completely differently. But we need to look at context. To do that, we'll examine words that are used with other words in the same chiron. For example, there's a difference in meaning between using the word gun in the context of violence versus control. So basically, context is the way or specific angle upon which news is covered and conveyed. So let's look at gun here first and write down some of these buzzwords. So, MSNBC, premature, debate, stocks. There we go. CNN, modifications, reignites, pellet, control. And then we have Fox, control, debate, Vegas for Las Vegas shooting. So pick one of the big 3 networks and really focus on those 5 buzzwords most frequently. Why do you think the network was cited as using those particular words the most? Okay, so for example, let's maybe look at CNN. Embraced, Fisher, loophole, debate, banning. Okay, well, clearly, I think this shows, if you look at CNN, maybe they are putting forth the narrative in favor of pro-gun control. And so to do so, they're using words that would elicit such responses that are in favor of pro-gun control. Let's look next at our next topic here, dossier. So let's go ahead and look at this. The dossier, compiled by an ex-M16 spy, Christopher Steele, has been a major sticking point in the Trump-Russia investigation. And covering the dossier, Fox focuses on the fact that it's anti-Trump, whereas MSNBC emphasizes the way it connects Trump to Russia. Just look at some of these words. Trump, Russia, author, GPS, fusion, co-founder, bogus, helped, tainted, blackmail, defies. Anti-Trump campaign, awesome, GPS, fusion. So let's look at some of these right now. CNN, bogus, helped, tainted. Then you have Fox News down here. Now, let's pick one of these 3 networks. Maybe let's go ahead and look at MSNBC. So as you can see by some of these words here, and I think it's pretty obvious, that MSNBC is trying to link the Trump administration to Russia and claims of corruption and scandal. Keep in mind, in our news media and world, it's corruption and scandal that tends to sell the most. So that's no surprise to anybody. We have 2 more topics here, I believe. We have Trump and tweet. So let's go ahead and do these here. Trump, GOP, Russia, House, white president, former political president, House campaign, president, resident, news, House, Korea. Okay, let's list some of these words. Okay. CNN, former political. and Fox. Let's try to find some other words here. Now, pick one of the three big news networks and talk about why it focuses on it the way it does. Well, I think if you look at some of these words over here, and it's pretty obvious if you get further and further down the list here, that Fox News is trying to focus on things that might pertain to Trump's accomplishments, and additionally some of his policies, and maybe even promises. So those types of things might help you as a viewer understand a little bit more about where they're coming from, where other networks clearly, I mean, are looking at some things that are not so kind to the Trump administration. Now let's go to the last part here, tweet. So, lied, obstruction, obstruct. Wrote, sexist, first ever, smear. And then over here we have deletes, standstill, halting, nasty. Now, if you look at CNN in particular, it's pretty clear to see that maybe CNN is making Trump look bad for his social media post. And additionally, you could probably say that they are trying to show him as unpresidential. And so in their news coverage, they can accomplish all these things by using context, words, buzzwords in particular, and phrases in this light. All right, guys, so as you can see, those are how the three different news networks cover the news. I hope that you found this to be a very helpful segment as we did the lesson parts together on the doc while reading and analyzing together. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you can use some of these traits and skills and talking points in the future when you analyze the news for yourself. Thank you very much.